Okay, can I have everybody's attention? Yes, thank you. This is Susan again. I am Susan Ament, the Peer Support Program Manager, and Lunch and Learn, which you just experienced or beginning to experience, is one of the services that we do under peer support. I hope you can hear pretty good. I do not want to turn the air conditioning off because, as you know, it would increase the heat element in here, and we don't want to do that. So we're just going to try to talk. I'll talk loud, and when I introduce Dr. Jicha, he will do the same. So we want to thank our caterer, Small Fry Catering. It's the first time we've used them, and I've heard from several of you that it was a really good lunch. And Julie made us chocolate chip cookies again, and they were fabulous. So thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you to our volunteers who are here serving and taking registration. I think Pam was the one who did registration today, and she's already had to leave, but Daniel and Rick are both helping. We will do food distribution after the speaker, after the speech today. I wanted to let you all know next month we will have our Lunch and Learn on the 4th Wednesday, as usual. And our speaker will be Jenny Ward, who we've had before, from Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and talking about low vision services and devices and anything that she's a very experienced counselor in that area, and we'll be talking about that and their services and give you some good tips, I think, on low vision and blindness. And blindness. We do both here. We do low vision, we do blindness. So our next outing is in August, and I believe it's August 14th. It's a Tuesday. We are going to have a movie here, a Disney movie, and it will be called Atta Girl Kelly, which is all about the training and matching of a guide dog and the dog's life, as well as the little boy who raises her and what they all go through as they move from master to master and finally get established with the one that they will be guiding. Okay, we also, for those of you who are new, we do have some new people here today, and some of you may not be, we want to invite you to sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter comes out twice a month, and you find out what we do, what's going on here. That keeps you informed. You can get that by email, or there is a way, if you don't do email, you can call our number and press 8 or 9, and you will be read the newsletter to you. So anybody who is print impaired can use that as an option to find out what's going on. We have support groups that meet here, one in person once a month for people who are wanting to meet others and learning from each other about dealing with low vision or blindness. And we have 2 evening Zoom meetings, one for people who are low vision or blindness, and the other one is for spouses of people who are dealing with low vision and blindness. And sometimes the spouse goes through just enough challenges of their own and appreciates being able to meet with others. So let me know more about those if you're interested. Let me know if you're interested, and I'll tell you more about those. 16th of August is a Tuesday?
No, 16th is the 14th is good.
Okay, thank you. So so that's when it is. That's when the movie is. From noon to 2. It's on Tuesday. The 3rd Tuesday of August. And part 3 will be shown in September. We will show, because this movie is in 3 parts. Okay, so we are very fortunate to have with us today as our speaker, Dr. Gregory Jicha, who is a memory neurologist. He is the director of the Sanders Brown Center on Aging, and he specializes in Alzheimer's research and the healthy brain, so we can learn maybe some tips on how to stay healthy in that area. I don't know anybody who wouldn't appreciate that. Dr. Jicha received his medical degree from Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He completed his fellowship at the Mayo Clinic, and he is board certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. So we are very fortunate to have him. He is a leading researcher and in this area in the United States, and he is also world renowned. So let's give him a hand and welcome Dr. Jicha.
Very good. Thank you, Susan, and thank you all for coming today. Really, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I'll try to keep some of my comments brief so that we have time for some questions, but this is the first time that I've spoken for the Council of the Blind, and it actually required me to go back and read up a little bit. I know quite a bit about blindness that comes from diseases like Alzheimer's affecting the brain, but very little about the interaction of vision impairment with brain health and or the development of Alzheimer's disease. So I was just going to start, I'm sure you know that all of us as we age, if you think you don't know somebody with Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia, then you're deluding yourself because they're out there. At least 1 out of 6 folks over the age of 65 will have outward signs of full-blown dementia, problems with their day-in, day-out functions, and a much higher percentage, 1 out of every 3, are going to have memory problems suggestive that they're developing down that road. And it's not just Alzheimer's disease. There's a host of disorders. And here in Kentucky, what we see is a lot of Alzheimer's, like everywhere else around the globe. But we also see a lot of what we call vascular cognitive impairment and dementia. That is what we used to call hardening of the arteries. And hardening of the arteries is real. And it looks frequently just like Alzheimer's disease. So very, very important. We say Alzheimer's, but we really mean all the things that are affecting memory and thinking over time. And I'd like to tell you all, vision impaired or blind, that, well, you've already paid your dues and that you're saved from that. But the truth of the matter is, you're not. None of us are. And so there have been a few studies that have been done. And really just over the past few years, this is an area that's largely been ignored. And it really sparked me as I had to go back and read up on this because there are some things that I did not know. The data coming out suggests that for folks with vision impairment, the risk for Alzheimer's may be 1.5 to 2 times greater than those with intact vision. So that really behooves us here today to really be thinking about our brain health because we don't want to be at high risk for this. I think that that's very important. Now, that is the cloud that hangs over you. But I'm an eternal optimist, and every cloud has a silver lining. The silver lining is, at least from the studies that have been done, several that have come out, one big one called the Adams study, Aging Demographics and Memory, published just in 2021 last year, looked at this and said, yes, while the risk for a memory problem is greater for the visually impaired at 1.5 to 2 times, the risk of full-blown dementia destroying your life is actually the same as everyone else. So, for those that are visually impaired, the likelihood, again, of a memory problem, yes, is going to be greater. You got to ward that off. But if you start to develop memory issues, it doesn't mean that the battle's lost. What it means is we've got to work on that memory problem, and we have the same chance as everybody else to not go on and develop a life-devastating dementia. So I think that that's interesting. Now, some people might say, well, that's true for all things and all diseases of aging. But the truth of the matter is it's not. If we look at the risk of vision impairment and Parkinson's disease, we see absolutely no effect whatsoever. So it's because the eyes are actually a part of the brain. They're just on the outside of the body. The nerve cells in your eyes are part of the brain. And so there are some shared diseases that can affect both. And I think that that's really important to understand. At least in the aging population, we have several causes of visual impairment or blindness that can be related to Alzheimer's disease. And these have been looked at in the laboratory for years and years and years, and in some population studies. We know that macular degeneration, that affects almost everybody as they get older. If you get old enough, you're going to have some degree of macular degeneration. It could be severe, and some is actually associated with amyloid deposition in the eye. Amyloid is what forms plaques in the brain of Alzheimer's. And so we can actually look in people's eyes, and we have a machine over at our research center called an OCT. Does anybody here know what an OCT machine is? An OCT machine stands for optical coherence tomography. And do you know why we use such big words like that? So we can charge you more for your medical and eye examinations. Yeah. And you can't complain about it because you don't know what you're really being billed for. That enables us to look into people's eyes, and we're doing this right now to develop this, to look into their eyes and see if we see amyloid in the eye, is it also going to be present in the brain? And that's an important question that we're working on over time. Glaucoma is another cause of vision impairment in those that age. Glaucoma can cause overt blindness and certainly eye problems. And the general thought with glaucoma is this buildup of pressure in the eye is slowly squishing and killing the nerve cells in the eye. And that same loss of nerve cells in the retina and in the eye is seen in Alzheimer's disease. And so these two have been linked together. And then, of course, getting back a little bit to hardening of the arteries and vascular cognitive impairment, we know that diabetic retinopathy is another major cause of visual impairment and blindness. And that's caused by vascular injury of the very tiny blood vessels. So for all intents and purposes, diabetic retinopathy is hardening of the arteries in the eye, which is a part of the brain. So we know these links. Now, one of the ways, you know, and you guys may or may not get a chuckle out of this, I always do. One of our studies to look at amyloid in the eye with this OCT machine uses turmeric. Does anybody know what turmeric is? Yeah, what's turmeric? It's a spice, right? It's found in Indian curries to a great degree, and a variety of other dishes. It's a bright yellow spice. And if we give people turmeric and they eat high quantities of turmeric, it actually lights up the amyloid in the back of the eye, and we can take a picture of it. So we send people home for 3 days with big pills full of turmeric and make them take tablespoons of turmeric every day. And then we come back and we take a picture of their eye. And that's not harmful for folks, but it's helping us to understand things. But we did get a lot of complaints. It turned everybody's teeth bright fluorescent yellow. And so we had to give everybody who participates in that research study a free toothbrush because it also ruins your toothbrush, and that's never any good. So, you know, we do a lot with research because we don't just want to help people with memory problems. We actually want to cure memory problems. We do not want anybody that ages to develop memory problems, irrespective of vision or other issues that they may have. That's important. And so we're doing a lot of studies. And, you know, it's really eye-opening to me as well as I looked at this that, you know, most of our research studies exclude folks that have more severe vision impairment. That's one of the reasons why this hasn't been studied real well. We like to show people pictures and make them draw things. And if you have vision impairment, it may not be easy to do that testing. I think that's wrong. And it really raised this. And so it's one of the reasons why I want to thank you all for having me here today, because you've made me really think about something that's incredibly important. Vision impaired folks are common, especially as we get older and older. And to me, it pains me in my heart that we need to find better ways. We're going to make experimental medicines that may cure Alzheimer's available to others in the community. We should be doing our darndest to make it available to you as well if you start to come down with a memory problem. And I'm going to work on that. I pledge to you all that I am going to work on that. And we have been working in some respects on that, developing tools, new tools to be able to evaluate memory in people that are visually impaired. And that's important. That's something that's been going on for some time. We have what we call the blind MOCA, which the MOCA is a memory test, has lots of pictures in it. Basically, we said, well, nobody with vision impairment can do this. Can we make a version that's just as good that doesn't require 20/20 vision? And yes, that's been a huge success. And it's fortunate that we did that several years ago because COVID hit, right? And you know, and COVID is a big black cloud over the community for everyone. And I'm sorry if any of you have gotten very ill or lost a loved one because of that. But always, I told you I'm the eternal optimist. And so if COVID's the cloud, what's the silver lining? Well, the silver lining is because people couldn't come into the center, people couldn't be evaluated in different studies. There was a huge impetus at the level of the National Institutes on Health to say, how can we test people for memory problems and follow them if they're receiving an experimental medicine from home? And using the telephone was the best way to do it. So there has been a huge effort over the last 2 years to develop telephone testing, the same way you guys get your newsletter by calling up and pushing 8 or 9. I think that's what she said. Is my memory serving me correctly? That you can get that newsletter. In the same way, we may be able to test memory in the future and use that really as a tool so that the visually impaired can have the same access to that research as everybody else has. I think that's important. I do think that if you start to develop a memory problem, it's really, really important. Everybody who develops a memory problem eventually is going to need somebody to help them with their activities. And we know that that's a burden on folks. But it turns out that if you have vision impairment and a memory problem, that burden on the folks that help you, the amount that you're going to need to ask them for, or if you're a caregiver that you're going to need to provide, almost doubles. It's twice as stressful, twice as difficult to do. And we need support for our caregivers that are caring for somebody with memory loss. And we need twice as much support for those that are caring for somebody with memory loss and vision impairment. Really, really important. So briefly, we'll touch base on ways to reduce risk for dementia. And I'll just check my timing because I don't want to interfere with food deliveries. There's going to be a lot of hungry people out there in Lexington if I talk too long. But I do want to talk about ways to reduce your risk for memory problems, ways to reduce your risk for dementia. Now, we know that a lot of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia is genetically driven. It runs in families. But if you don't have a family member with it, don't think you're scot-free. So about 50% is genetic. About 50% is environmental, meaning you could have no family history whatsoever. And I was telling a story today to a young couple that came in to visit with me about another couple that came to see me 3 years ago. And the wife had 2 parents who had Alzheimer's disease, and 3 of her 4 brothers and sisters had Alzheimer's disease. And she thought, I clearly am going to develop Alzheimer's. I need to get into a vaccine study or a prevention trial. And her husband was coming along to support her. No family history of Alzheimer's and dementia whatsoever. And we took a picture, a PET scan, where we can actually see the amyloid in the brain. And I was able to come out and tell her the good news. No signs of Alzheimer's whatsoever, despite your strong family history. But you know, this white cloud had a black lining. And I had to turn a dark lining. I had to turn to the husband and say, but your brain shows that it is full of Alzheimer's pathology. So sometimes we can't escape these things, but there may be things that we can do. And so what can we do? Well, we know that your medical conditions need to be well controlled. High blood pressure is a major risk, not just for vascular cognitive impairment and dementia, hardening of the arteries, but a major risk for Alzheimer's disease. We want your top number, your systolic blood pressure, less than 130. Excuse me, and there's even data suggesting less than 120 is even better. You don't want it so low that you're passing out and can't deliver the food this afternoon, but we do want it down there like a teenager. If you want the brain of a teenager with a little more wisdom in it because of your years, right? Get that blood pressure down. Get your diabetes, your cholesterol under control. These are important. Work with your doctor to say, hey, I want you to take my health seriously because I take it seriously. You can physically exercise, and that doesn't mean you have to have an expensive, buy the latest, skin tight workout outfit and a $700 private exercise instructor. This means 20 minutes a day. Take a brisk walk.
30 minutes a day.
Or 30 minutes a day, even better. And I've had folks say, I can't walk that long. I had one gentleman, congestive heart failure. He could only walk for 5 minutes at a time before he was out of breath. Well, he'd go outside every day after lunch and he'd walk around his house for 5 minutes. And then he'd sit down for 10, 15 minutes and take a rest. And when he got his oxygen back, he'd walk around it again. So that's cumulative time, but you got to kind of get the heart rate up a little bit. Cognitive stimulation, right? So stimulate your brain. Attend some of these activities. I'm looking at the sea cruise here, thinking, by golly, oh, it's nice. But where's the ocean here in Kentucky? Anyway, all of these activities that are out there are going to stimulate your mind. Pick up a new hobby, guy. Watch your diet, right? Homemade chocolate chip cookies are great, but try to get some fruits and veggies in, right? Right, very good, very good. So really important. And then social engagement. You guys may not realize it, but today, just coming here, right, you had to physically get here. And if you're running late like me, literally running, you got some exercise in. And we're listening and stimulating our mind with information. We're also socially engaging at each of your tables. You guys each have reduced your risk for Alzheimer's today just by being here. Isn't that good news? I don't know how much they charge, the council charged for that, but
no pillow.
Hopefully not as much as your doctor's charge. So I did want to make one final comment for you all, and it's something that I alluded to at the beginning. I do have a lot of patients with Alzheimer's disease, and you may not know it, but we have a form of Alzheimer's disease called posterior cortical atrophy, posterior cortical degeneration. Really is Alzheimer's, plaques and tangles, has a tendency to affect women more than men, and it affects them very early in their 50s and 60s. And what it does is, instead of attacking the memory circuits where people get forgetful, it attacks the vision areas of the brain, and they lose their vision. And at first they think it's an eye problem, and they go to their eye doctor and get their eyeglasses changed over and over again, and it doesn't do a darn bit of good until eventually they realize this is a brain problem. they actually become what we call cortically blind. And it's a huge problem because we don't have any resources to help those folks. We used to have a visual therapist down in Nicholasville who would help train them. How, if you can't make sense of what your eyes are seeing, then vision is no good for you. What can you do? How can you learn to function without vision or with impaired vision? Now, you all know about this. You all actually have a gift that comes back to clouds with silver linings. You have learned. And many of my patients struggle with this. I try to connect them with services for the blind, but people always say, well, they're not eligible for these services. They have 20/20 vision. I'm like, they can't see a darn thing. Nothing. Try to get them seeing eye dogs, other things. It is something, especially affecting these young 50-year-old, 60-year-old women that I really, I always go for the underdog, and for them, my heart bleeds for them. I thought today, that I might just call out, if you all are ever looking for a community service project, to potentially think of, could we hold a workshop for those with Alzheimer-related vision problems, where we could give them a hug, let them know they're not alone. Teach them some of the tricks of the trade for how you've all been able to adapt to vision impairment and or blindness. We would love to work with you all to think about some sort of companion training program for those that might be interested. So talk with Keisha afterwards. Vision impairment is not all in the eye. Sometimes it's in the brain as well, because the two are really one and the same for all intents and purposes. So I'm going to stop there, and we covered an awful lot of material. Hopefully that was of interest. I hope I stimulated you guys thinking, and that I haven't tied up food deliveries. I hate thinking about all those hungry people out there again, but for whatever time we have left, I'm happy to answer questions that anyone may have about what we talked about today or about anything else. So yes, in red, this young gentleman, Dennis.
Other arteries. Your hand going to sleep, or both hands going to sleep.
So the question was, if you have hardening of the arteries, would that explain your hands going to sleep? And it could, Dennis. But more than likely, when we see hands going to sleep, almost always it's carpal tunnel syndrome. Very, very common. And there are good treatments, wrist splints for carpal tunnel. 2 of my patients this morning came in with wrist splints on. My wife has to wear them every day. And sometimes just a minor surgery can release those nerves. But for anyone having that kind of a problem, the first thing to do is have that looked at as well. But for any time, I've developed a little weakness here or a weakness there. That could be mini strokes in the brain, which is part of hardening of the arteries. But you don't have to. You can have hardening of the arteries and not have any physical symptoms at all. Just memory and thinking symptoms. So, yes. Oh.
Let me go forward a little bit. That's my next thought.
So I'll come back for the sake of recording anyway to answer that. The question was other forms of visual impairment that are associated with retinal degeneration can also have amyloid deposits. And so this is a great question and one that's really, really important. And I'm glad you asked it, Rick. There are more than one type of amyloid. So amyloid really is a generic term for proteins that clump together abnormally and kind of clog up the system, so to speak. And so Alzheimer amyloid is a different type of amyloid than what we see in many other conditions. And so that's part of what an eye doctor does. So some of these inherited or genetic conditions associated with retinal degeneration and amyloid in the eye have a different type of protein. And there is work going on in the field for that as well. Transthyretin is a protein produced by the liver that can form amyloid deposits both in the eye and around the nerves in the body and cause degeneration. And we're already starting to develop as well, not myself personally, because I'm largely focused on memory and thinking, but others in the field are starting to develop new medicines that inactivate that amyloid and its pathologic consequences. So a lot of work in the field being done. But if you've been told you have amyloid in your eye, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's Alzheimer amyloid. That has to be looked at specifically. So great question. Yes. Yeah. So the question was about diabetic retinopathy, which certainly I talked about it as a major cause of vision impairment and vision loss and blindness. Very, very important. Certainly an eye doctor is how we diagnose diabetic retinopathy. And there have been new treatments, medicines, ways for them, because as the diabetes affects these small blood vessels in the eye and start to injure the cells in the retina, other new blood supply, new capillaries and the like start moving into the area. And they actually, to compensate, they actually are part of the problem as well in diabetic retinopathy. So we have multiple ways to do that. But when frequently, when you're diagnosed with diabetic retinopathy, when you're diagnosed with many of these eye conditions, the optometrist or ophthalmologist frequently is not going to pause to think about your brain. It is very, very rare. And so it behooves you all. And part of that is really getting that information out. We're trying to work right now. It's just like, people with vision problems, and we do work with one of our neuro-ophthalmologists, Dr. Sudhakar, in clinic to raise awareness of these sorts of issues. We're working with the docs and for people with kidney failure that, yes, we know you're treating kidney failure, but that kidney failure may be due to diabetes, may be due to other vascular injury, and you should stop to think about, hey, are they having that same vascular injury to the brain? The second part of that question, though, is vision's bad sometimes, but the brain is sharp, and that is wonderful. We do know that the retina and the kidneys are heavily hit with with injury from diabetes, and sometimes the brain is spared from that. So getting that diabetes under control so it doesn't continue to hurt those small blood vessels is what you want to do to keep your brain sharp. But we've got to start getting doctors to think about patients as a whole. And I'm guilty of this as well. I always tell people I'm only good from the neck up. If you got a problem below the neck, don't come see me. I've forgotten everything they taught me in medical school about that as we focus in our individual areas. And that's really the role of the primary care physician, to think about the whole person, not just about that one little piece that a specialist sees. So, great questions. So quite a few things in that question. The first is major cause of hardening of the arteries. And, we've been studying this now for about 12 years. Back when nobody was studying it, I wrote a grant to the National Institutes of Health. That's your tax dollars at work, by the way. So it's your research. And to look at this, because we see so much of this in Kentucky. What we can see is that the primary driver of hardening of the arteries, there are many different risks for hardening of the arteries, but the primary risk is blood pressure. The second most powerful risk is blood pressure. And the third most powerful risk is blood pressure, blood pressure, blood pressure. That's what's driving it. And what we've seen about hardening of the arteries, which is fascinating, a discovery that's come from our center right here in Kentucky, and it's being picked up really by researchers worldwide, is that the majority of people, 50 to 60% with hardening of the arteries, it's just as bad as Alzheimer's disease, devastating. But about a quarter of people can, if they get their blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes under control, start exercising and eating right, they can stop it in its tracks and it never gets any worse. And what's even more amazing is that a quarter of people, when we fix those problems, the brain actually heals itself. And even on the MRI pictures of the brain, we can see it disappearing. So this is a disease that we already potentially can cure if we do a better job of it. Really important. And the second part of the question was really about why do so many doctors not know about these sorts of things, and if our doctors are not aware of these things, how can we really trust them? Well, I'll say two things with that. First, something that I commonly tell everybody, if your doctor's not listening to you, if your doctor's not taking care of you the way you want to be taken care of, you should fire them, right? Doctors are, if you went to a hairdresser and they butchered your hairdo, right, or colored your hair green when you didn't want it green, you would fire your hairdresser. And I think that's important. We're a service industry. And doctors forget that sometimes because they all have big egos. And me too. I try to stay humble. It's hard. It's hard, the fight that I have to do every day. But I always say, as a service industry, fire us if we're not doing a good job. Give us a tip if we're doing a good job, right? I'd like that extra 15% on everybody that I see. Just one more question, I think, and then and I did want to make one final comment. We work very hard, not just to come out into the community and educate people. We work extremely hard getting grants to educate doctors, nurses, other medical healthcare professionals, anybody that'll listen to us. So, did we have one back there, or we have one up here? I'm sorry, they have one in the back. So the question was, is vitamin K beneficial to Alzheimer's disease? So I'll start by saying, number one, all of your supplements, including vitamin K, actually are not as benign as a vitamin. Any of you on blood thinners should not be taking vitamin K. It'll thicken your blood and cause a stroke or a heart attack. So sometimes even a vitamin you need to share with your doctor and say, is this safe to take? Now, with that being said, there are a lot of vitamins that are potentially beneficial for brain health. And vitamin K has been suggested by some to potentially, if you don't have a problem where you need to keep the blood thin, vitamin K may be helpful. But all those commercials that you see on TV, you know, Prevagen made out of jellyfish and Nariva fuel 6 indicators of brain health. These are our, what's that? Or beets. These are all just vitamins and supplements. And if you eat a healthy diet, you really don't need anything else. If you're not eating a healthy diet, please take a multivitamin every day. And that's important. And I wish that we could study them more. We've only really studied a few vitamins and supplements ever in regards to brain health, because nobody will pay for the research, except for rarely when we can get funding from the National Institutes on Health, because you can't patent vitamin K, right? You can't patent fish oil. So no company's going to make millions of dollars. Nobody's going to invest in it unless they see a profit at the end of the day, and that's a problem. But I do think as long as you've cleared any supplements you guys may want to take for your brain health, just clear them with your doctor and go for it. As long as it's not driving you to the poor farm, is the most important thing. And I'm a firm believer that our diet has many protective elements in it if we're eating a good diet. So we heard beets over here. I love beets. They're fantastic. So with that, I think we've got hungry people throughout the community anyway, but it's been just a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'd love to come back sometime in the future.
Okay, folks, I have 2 questions to ask, and this is not to evaluate Dr. Jicha, but to evaluate our program a little bit. So if you would raise your hand if you learned something new today.
I gotta count.
Keep them up for a minute. Okay, and one more question. You can lower your hand. How many found something today that they learned to be helpful to them or their family, friends? Okay, we got it. Okay, thank you, Pam, and thank you to all the volunteers today again. Yeah, did everybody get a squishy brain handout? Because those are your hand exercisers and stress release materials. I didn't get one. I gotta get one before you leave. So yes. So all right, thank you. Food distribution is next. Daniel and Judy and Matt Ferguson is going to be helping with food distribution. And so if you'll line up at the door over here, those of you who have signed up for food distribution, I'm talking about, so that you know what it is. Supplemental groceries for people who need help managing their food budget and shopping needs because they're visually impaired. All right. Thank you.
Sarah. You ready? So you just got a second opinion.
I got it.
Thank you.
Some are leaving, some are getting removed before they leave. Wheels will start picking up in a minute. Yeah. You gotta be careful that you don't fall.
I know how to fall.
Well, that's a good thing. I have a friend that I don't know the way about it. He had he had 2 strokes and failed twice. Now, I don't know if the stroke happened first, but he fell. But it all happened at the same time. I don't know which way it happened, but now in actually supposed to be one. Had several things happen to him in his life. He was stuff when they was working on some stuff. And the operator several meetings we've been with him. Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wake up. This morning, I was laying in the way.